and welcome to CYC News for the 18th of June 2017 and the 11th of Ba'un 17:33 am. I'm Justine Twadros, and in today's headlines, suicide attacks in Iraqi Shiite region target civilians, Trump speaks to Saudi king as the Gulf crisis deepens, London fire, mourning, anger and questions over the lives lost in inferno, London's Borough Market reopens after the terror attack that shook the world. EU impatient for Brexit talks amid UK post-election chaos. Risk of polio spread spikes in DRC after 2 outbreaks. And Real Madrid's Cristiano Ronaldo is accused of millions of dollars in tax evasion. In our top story, 2 suicide attacks target civilians on Friday in a Shiite region south of Iraq's capital, leaving at least 22 people dead and dozens wounded. ISIS, the Sunni terror movement, claims responsibility for both attacks, but CNN cannot independently verify its assertion. The attacks are the latest strikes in a country on edge over violence during the holy month of Ramadan, and to intensify war against ISIS. Operations are underway in both Syria and Iraq. One of the Friday strikes killed and wounded civilians in an outdoor market in the town of Al-Masyaba. According to CNN, at least 22 people died and more than 30 others were wounded. The majority of the Shiite town is about 75 kilometers and more than 46 miles south of Baghdad in Babil province. Security officials confirmed that women and children were among the victims. In Karbala, a suicide bomber injured at least 10 people. Karbala is a holy and historic city in Shiite Islam, is in Karbala province. The city is about 27 kilometers of 17 miles and west of Al-Masyaba. Amark news agency, the media voice of ISIS, claimed responsibility for the terror group in both attacks in separate statements on Friday on social media. There have long been sharp tensions and sectarian violence between Sunnis and Shiite adherents of the largest branches in Islam. The leaders of the United States and Saudi Arabia spoke as a growing number of countries moved to severe ties with Qatar over alleged ties to terror networks. President Donald Trump spoke with Saudi King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud on the need to regionally cooperate in preventing the financing of terrorism. According to a readout of the conversation released by the White House, eliminating the promotion of extremists by any nation in the region, which did not mention Qatar by name. The document continued, the president underscored that a united Gulf Cooperation Council is critical to defeating terrorism and promoting regional stability. Qatar hosts one of the largest US military bases in the region. 3 of the Council's 6 members have cut relations with Doha, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates. The Gulf Cooperation Council is viewed as one of the most influential in the Middle East. 6 other governments also have suspended diplomatic ties. The UAE announced that expressing sympathy, inclination, or favoritism towards Qatar is punishable by 3 to 15 years in prison, alongside a minimum fine of 500,000 dirhams, about $136,000. To London, British Prime Minister Theresa May has announced a full public inquiry into Grenfell Tower disaster, as grief turned to anger a day after the blaze that left at least 17 dead. Speaking after visiting the site of the devastating fire in North Kensington, President May said she wanted to make sure this terrible tragedy is properly investigated. London's fire chief said there was little chance of finding anyone else alive in the charred remains of the tower. Dozens of people remain missing. May's government was facing growing questions about why ministers did not act on recommendations following an earlier fire in London, which led to calls for sprinkler systems to be installed in residential blocks and for a full review of Britain's fire regulations. A prominent London Member of Parliament, David Lammy, of the opposition Labour Party, said corporate manslaughter charges should be brought against those held responsible for the tragedy. Still in London, traders, police, tourists and locals gathered for a moment of silence at London's Borough Market on Wednesday. Mourning before ringing the opening bell for the first time since the terror attack there 11 days ago. The normally bustling marketplace, packed with stores peddling everything from artisan beads to aromatic curries and British birch trees, had been boarded up, and since a vehicle and knife attack on June 3rd left 8 people dead. Donald Hislop, chair of the trustees of Borough Market, said that the reopening marks the start of the healing process of the community. Hislop said in a statement, while the victims of last week's terror attack will never be forgotten, and while the trauma experienced by this community will weigh heavily for a long time to come, it is essential for the well-being of everyone associated with the Borough Market that we return to at least a semblance of normality as soon as we can. The stores will open, customers will start to arrive, and the healing process will begin. That healing process will require a vast well of empathy and support, something that we know exists here in abundance. Just days earlier, bullet holes were still visible in the shutters of some stores where police fired on the 3 knife welding assailants as they stormed nearby restaurants and pubs. The men, who have since been identified by police, were shot dead just under Borough Market's iconic Stoneleigh Street entrance. Many walking to work through the area on Wednesday passed by a blue and white Take Courage sign, a relic of the Courage and Company brewery, which feels more emotional in the wake of the attack. Piles of floral tributes and a rainbow-coloured array of sticky notes have been left at the south end of London Bridge, where the attackers ploughed their vehicles into pedestrians before making their way to the market below. Love will always win, and no one can divide the people of London are among sentiments papering the makeshift wall of remembrance. Hislop says that while the Borough Market community had been sorely tested, it was also flooded by similar messages of support as well as offers of assistance. And he adds that anyone else hoping to help in the coming weeks could do so in one simple way, by turning up and putting a buzz back into the atmosphere. In other news, 5 days on from the stalemate of the UK general election result, Europe's impatience with the Britons over Brexit is growing. UE officials are itching to start Brexit talks, but Prime Minister Theresa May is distracted by the negotiations over the makeup of the new British government. Formal talks were due to start next Monday, June 19th, but that date is looking less certain, though May insisted at a press conference with French leader Emmanuel Macron on Tuesday evening that talks would go ahead next week as planned. No one is clear what the UK wants anymore. The hung Parliament election result has left May's plan for a clean break with Europe under a so-called hard Brexit in tatters as her embodied rivals in the UK. Parliament demanded it's watered down. When the Prime Minister sat down for dinner with Emmanuel Macron in Paris on Tuesday evening, the new French president, who set out his stall as a UE reformer, likely reminded her that the clock is ticking. After dinner, the two leaders were due to watch a friendly soccer match between England and France, but even that game goes into extra time. EU leaders are making clear to May that there can be no extension to the 2-year period of negotiation before Britain must leave Europe in March 2019. There is frustration among EU leaders and officials that 3 months have already passed since May triggered Article 50, the device which started the Brexit process. Formal talks were due to start next Monday, June 19th, but that date is looking shaky. In health, 2 separate outbreaks of polio have been reported in remote parts of the Democratic Republic of Congo, a setback for large-scale efforts to eradicate the high infectious and potentially fatal disease. The World Health Organization warned in a statement there is a high risk of disease spreading across the country, though not beyond its borders. 4 cases have been reported in children between 17 and 36 months old in the province of Haut-Lomami and Maniema, both in the center of the country. All 4 children are paralyzed and are being monitored. Their families also are being monitored and getting tested regularly to see if they have become infected. According to Oliver Rosenberg, the World Health Organization Global Polio Eradication Initiative spokesman, it's not unusual and it's the very young who are most at risk. It further underscores the risk how quickly polio can re-emerge in polio-free areas. One type of virus was found in 2 cases and a second identified in the 2 other cases, as well as in a health contact who carried the virus but showed no symptoms. And in sport, Real Madrid and Portugal star Cristiano Ronaldo has been accused by prosecutors in Spain of defrauding Spanish authorities of $16.4 million in tax between 2011 and 2014. In a statement, the prosecutor's office said Ronaldo, a 4-time Ballon d'Or winner, has used a business structure created in 2010 to hide the revenue generated by his image right from the Spanish treasury, describing the breach as voluntary and conscious. The 32-year-old, the world's highest paid sports star according to Forbes, has been charged with 4 crimes against the public treasury. The statement and Portuguese became a Spanish tax resident in January 2010 and in November 2011, opted to follow the Spanish tax regime that applies to foreigners working in the country. And that's all for CYC News. A reminder that you can watch the news bulletin throughout the week on YouTube. I'm Yasin Twadros from the CYC News studios in Sydney, Australia. Have a good night.